to Zachipedia, and today we're going to be discussing piratology. Now, that might sound like a word that's sort of familiar, but it's actually a form of history, which studies, as you might have guessed, pirates. Now, piracy goes back to a very, very, very long time. We've actually tracked down cases of piracy with the Calusa natives off the coast of Florida, where they would go in canoes and throw spears at enemy tribes, and then take all of the supplies from the dead natives. Now, the piracy that we all think of, such as a crew and a captain and a boat, that didn't come into play until about a few thousand years ago, in distinctively Greece. Now, some of these Greek merchants, usually, would go on ships with crew and have a quartermaster or a first mate to help keep things organized, who would go on their ships and plunder ships off the coast of the Greek islands. For practically every Greek island had some form of merchant business. Now, piracy also dates back to the Romans, and as a matter of fact, in 73 BCE, the Roman leader, Julius Caesar, at the age of 27, was kidnapped by pirates for hostage. Now, he was eventually bought back by his father, but he actually considerably had hopes of becoming a pirate, as he wrote in his diary. But about 12 years later, he became a consul for the Roman Republic instead. Now, piracy also dates back to the ancient Chinese, for during the Zhou dynasty and the Ming dynasties, pirates in the South China Sea would actually go onto the mainland and siege and steal from the mainland and then get back on their ships and leave. Or, in the case of the city Nuoang in 90 BCE, they would actually take cities and make them pirate cities, where pirates would hide out and plan for expansion. Now, that ended by the fall of Naogang, but there were some what you consider pirate cities, to where in the 1600s, Port Royal in southern Jamaica and Tortuga off the coast of the Caribbean were known for having free porting, meaning that anyone could dock their ships for free. Therefore, some mischievous characters would come on the islands and would spread debauchery and even pirate headquarters without ever being charged. One pirate who was notorious for doing this was one named Black Caesar, who was an escaped slave from the coast of Kenya, who eventually ended up working for Blackbeard on his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. However, he was known for suffering from 3 diseases at once: leprosy, jaundice, and scurvy, all of which were common, but was remarkable that he could survive and made him an intimidating prospect. He came to a weary end, though, when he would go on Mangroves Islands in the Keys and wait for ships to crash, or he would shoot their rudders so they would crash. He ended up being placed in a trap, though, when a fake ship full of British soldiers came and he was sieged. Now, other forms of piracy include a man named Bartholomew Roberts, who in the 1600s took his crew and actually gave them bedtimes. For one, he was very religious and believed that witches at night would come and curse them if they plunged at night, and two, he wanted his crew to be fresh and rested for the new coming plunder, and he believed that a good night's sleep was a way to ensure that. Now, one thing that pirates were always known for was to be open to different races, religions, and such. For most pirates were all on the same force together and didn't have time for discrimination. Even females were actually predominantly part of the piracy group, for they were very handy for most people or soldiers fighting them underestimated them and believe them only as women, even though they were actually good distractions and well-equipped warriors. This is the case for the Captain Jack Rackham, or Crackalow Jack, as he was known, for he had two mistresses who were also part of his crew, named Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Now, one thing that pirates were also known for, though, were being very strict. Since they couldn't really read or write, they would make constitutions by plundered, wealthy merchants or people who were well-educated on their ships to write a constitution and explain to them what it was. Sometimes it was a blank piece of paper with just insults written by them to the pirates. However, they still claimed it to be their rule book. And if anyone even made one mistake, such as drinking too much, or getting angry or aggressive over a small game, they would be known to be severely punished, or what they call petty punishments, for what Bartholomew Roberts used to do if they would break his rules of bedtime and ghost stories, would be he would leave them on a deserted island with only a gun and a bottle of rum. For pirates like to give people a chance, which is why, despite Robert Louis Stevenson's novel Treasure Island, when this was popularized, walking the plank was not generally used, only to put people on desert islands, for they thought that leaving people in the water meant absolute death. And that was no fun for pirates. They had to have a chance of possibly being rescued. Now, what happened is that other forms of punishment, such as petty crimes, could result in lashings by a whip, or they could include keel hauling or leg burning. Now, keel hauling ended up not being used too often, for it was when you would grab a rope and swing someone under a boat and be scraped by barnacles. But that usually meant either great pain to where the pirate could no longer plunge, or it would also mean that the pirate could no longer even live after a few times, and it just would tear the crew apart. Therefore, different punishments were used only for certain matters. However, the most severe punishments were used if pirates were captured. Since most things such as gold, riches, people, and other things were all transported by ship back in the day, the governments were not very popular with piracy, for they thought it jeopardized getting things from one place to another. Therefore, if pirates were kidnapped or arrested, it could mean serious punishment. By the 17th century, the most common punishment for piracy was hanging. But before then, during the Elizabethan era, and in other parts of Europe, people would be beheaded for piracy. Or, in the case of Mary I, they would be burned alive on stakes. In some cases, like with the Visigothic kingdom in modern Spain, they would actually burn and make pirates go through the same punishments they would normally go through for doing what they did on a pirate crew. Now, one form of piracy, basically, was the name of this piracy, was called privateering. And privateers were known to be very crafty with their work, for privateers were considered soldiers, for they were hired pirates by the government to plunder enemy ships. Now, that meant that they were normally given a trial and were normally imprisoned. But back in the day, imprisonment was thought to be pretty brutal and vile, so that could be considerably even worse than execution. One famous story of pirates who were killed before execution was the story of Blackbeard. And Blackbeard was a very notorious pirate known for burning his hairs, shooting people in the side, of course, and plundering ships with zero casualties. Despite his intimidation, people were too afraid to fight him, so he had no reason to kill anyone. Now, his death, though, was was very, very severe, and the story was remarkable. For a lieutenant named Sir Robert Maynard was assigned to kill him after finding him off the coast of Virginia in North Carolina. Now, they were met on an island, and Maynard and Blackbeard did a one-on-one face-off while their crew were fighting each other. In the end, after Blackbeard was shot 19 times, stabbed in the neck by another member of the crew, and fighting Maynard, who only had a mere leg wound, Blackbeard was finally defeated, and his head was chopped off by Maynard and put on the flagpole of the ship. However, some people claim that his body, his decapitated body, swam around the ship for an hour after his death. Now, piracy still exists today, though it's very rare, since number one, laws are more enforced and there are tracking signals to find pirates. Two, pirates now are not really pirateering ships, for ships now are not really common ways for transporting goods, and mainly do not really hold too many valuable things like gold, mostly supplies. But advanced pirates are still out there, as in the movies like Philip or Captain Phillips and more. It shows that pirates, especially in lower income countries, are still out there. Now, I hope that piracy is a wrongdoing to you, and that the quote, Concordia rest sentias, or as runners we pass on the torch of life, shows that you get the torch, or you deserve it, not plunder it. Farewell then, and I hope that you're not afraid to go in the water now. So, I'm actually going to go for a dip, so no pirates.